So I've started hearing advertisements for Apple Cards in podcasts. Have you heard any?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, I was a little taken aback when I first heard it because there hasn't been really too much said or heard about the Apple Card since the release. Well, there's that little thing about opting out of the arbitration or whatever that was, and it did a small news cycle. But since then, it's kind of just flown under the radar until just 2 days ago or so. And the start of, what podcast was it? Maybe the Vergecast. And there was a little ad for the Apple Card.
Interesting. I see. I don't think I've ever heard any Apple ads actually run on a podcast before.
I don't think I have either. So this is a whole new world.
Yeah. Man, I sure do love my Apple Card, though. I was actually just going back through my transaction history this morning, now that you can export them. And so far, since I got the card at the end of August, I've gotten just over $400 in cash back.
Wow, that's pretty respectable.
Yeah.
Does that mean you've spent like $40K since August, though?
No, there's no way. I average like between $1,500 and $2,000 a month on the card.
Mm-hmm.
So that's definitely not $40K. That's
no,
like
not quite.
12 or
since
something.
August.
Yeah.
That's like barely 6 months.
Yeah.
So maybe like 12 grand, say, roughly.
At the
400
most,
back
yeah.
on 12 grand is pretty good.
Yeah. So that's $400 I otherwise just wouldn't have gotten. So that's a win in my books.
Like 3-4%. So how does that work out when I thought it was just like a standard 1% cashback?
Well, it depends on the transactions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and anything you use the physical card itself on is 1%.
That's right.
I try to use Tap to Pay as much as possible, which doubles it to 2%. And then a lot of those purchases are through Apple, so I actually got 3%. Like for my Christmas shopping did a big boost for that. So
10 of the 12K was actually at the Apple Store. Admit it, come on. You've been holding out. You've actually got a Mac Pro sitting back there, don't you?
Oh man, no way.
The new one.
It's actually not possible. Like if you wanted to get like a maxed out Mac Pro, it's not possible to buy that with the Apple Card because Apple doesn't have a limit that high.
The maxed out one. Okay. Well, That's fair enough. I wonder how you are supposed to pay for it then.
Split it up among multiple cards.
Or just walk in with your duffel bag full of cash.
There was a period where I did take advantage a little bit of Apple's 6% cash back over the holidays too, so that probably boosted my numbers a bit.
That's nice.
Yeah. So overall, I'd call the Apple Card a win. 100% of my purchases go through that card now, and then I just end up paying it off at the end of the month. So free money.
And how do you find the paying off part of it? Because there were some complaints about it not having a web UI and such things.
I mean, I haven't been bothered by having to do it on my phone. That hasn't been an inconvenience. It is a little inconsistent with how quickly your balance becomes available. Occasionally, or I'd say 80% of the time, if I make a payment on the card, that credit is immediately available to me again, even before they withdraw the money from my bank account. But there is the other 20% of the time where it's like 3 to 5 days before it processes and gives me the credit back. And it happens rarely enough that when it does happen, I wonder if like something went wrong and they took my money and then didn't credit me. And so I've actually contacted their support a few times about it because it feels weird because usually it works so well.
Right.
Every time I'm just told to wait and it eventually shows up. So
last question then. The little colourful graphic, is that of any use to you? Since it was like a front and center marketing feature, and normally those types of things are just that, and they're not of any real use. I can't actually even remember what it's supposed to show. Something like how up to date you are on repayments or something like that. The
color the card turns?
Yeah, in the wallet app.
Yeah, so the color of the card is based on the types of transactions you make. So
That's the types.
like leisure activities are green and travel is blue. And so whatever you make the most purchase of, your card will be that mostly that color, and then there'll be some other things splashed in based on what you've spent it on.
And is that useful in any way?
No.
Okay.
I flew across the country to visit my brother last weekend, and my whole card turned blue from plane tickets and all of that. So I guess that's informative to know that was the majority of my purchases, but I kind of already knew that.
Yeah, you could have guessed that because you spent the money.
Mm-hmm. So
maybe it's handy when you share a card somehow with like your partner, and suddenly it all turns blue, and you're not actually aware of any holidays that are upcoming, and it turns out she's taking the kids to Disneyland without you.
Is it possible to have multiple account holders with Apple Card?
Yeah, I don't know. I was wondering that as I was saying it.
Yeah, it's not something I've looked into, but it's also not an option I've seen when just playing with the settings.
I wouldn't think so. Maybe unless you're the type of couple that shared an iCloud account as well, then maybe you could do it. But yeah, I don't think there's actual joint cards.
Yeah.
Well, I'm still waiting for Apple Pay Cash, let alone the Apple Card over here in Australia.
That is so amazing to me that you don't even have cash yet. It's something I just take for granted at this point.
Well, we lose out on those two things, but we do have contactless payment at 99.9% of locations, so you win some and you lose some, I guess.
Maybe that's what they're worried about. If they bring the Apple Card over there, all your payments will be contactless, and they can't do the 2% thing like they can here.
It'll end up costing them too much.
Right.
Maybe.
Huh.
I'm at a crossroads in my life.
Okay.
My iPad is starting to drive me crazy.
What's wrong with it?
Well, for the third time in about as many months, it has run out of space, which doesn't sound like a major problem.
Mm-hmm.
But it kind of is, because the iPad doesn't think it's out of space. Like, all the little storage graphics say that I'm at... Well, I've never been over 100 gig of the 256 gig capacity on the iPad. The little graphic with the colours and whatnot, and I've let it sit there for 5 minutes to recalculate and do whatever it does. It's never, ever shown in the 3 months more than 100 gig. And yeah, I try and do things on it, and it says it's out of space. Can't do this, can't import photos, can't download something to the cache because there's no space left on the device.
That's
and
crazy.
I've solved it twice so far just by erasing the iPad and setting it up from new. But then I did it again at the start of this week, and it's just like this. Like I've got no recourse to fix this problem.
So
besides erasing it,
is the nature of the issue that your iPad is actually maxing out at like 100 gigabytes of storage, or is it that it's not accounting for the 250 gigabytes worth of stuff? Like, do you think you actually have 250 gigabytes worth of stuff, or do you think your storage is just not available to you?
I don't think there's a problem with the storage, and I just used 100 gig as just like a rough example. The actual space shown when it says it's out of space could be anywhere from like 60 to 100 gigabytes. Okay. What I suspect is happening is that it's keeping caches of my iCloud photo library and iCloud document, iCloud Drive. It's keeping caches of them on the device to fairly aggressively. So it might actually be using all 256 gig as that invisible cache that iOS and macOS also keep on the device,
right?
Which it should be able to free up as necessary.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, the freeing up part isn't happening fast enough or happening at all. I think it is doing it because sometimes I can reboot the device and then suddenly I can do the thing again, like it's claimed back a bit of free space.
So is this like happening when you're trying to import like tens of gigabytes of data at once and it can't clear up the space fast enough?
That's often when I notice it. It's not normally in the realm of tens. It's normally in the realm of 1 to 3 gigabytes of photos because I do a lot of photo importing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, in that sort of range is when I notice it, up to 3 gigabytes, and it says it's out of space.
That doesn't sound right at all to me. I wonder.
Yeah, but when you Google it, a lot of people have this problem as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's just not a problem that's prolific enough to make it to the front page.
No. Maybe because it's kind of a hardish problem to describe. There's not an exact error message because, well, it depends which app you're using as to what sort of out of space error message you get. There's no system alert about space issues.
Right.
So it's a tricky thing to locate any centralized source of information about it. But I did find a thread on the Apple support communities with hundreds of replies with similar issues, and nearly all of them were with regards to the camera, the photos importing as well. Although maybe that's just because that's what the error message I stumbled across was. Yeah. But anyway, I'm at a crossroads because that, along with a recent bug, which is a little minor, but ever since 13.4, is that what we're up to? No, 13.3. Whatever the latest iOS is. Every time I unlock my iPad, it's at 80 to 90% brightness. It's just this weird bug. It's very annoying.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so when you say you're at a crossroads, do you have 2 ways you might want to solve this problem? Are you considering upgrading your storage, or are you considering going back to a laptop, or what are you thinking?
Yeah, so upgrading the storage is option 1, but my worry is it's not going to fix it because my iCloud photo library plus iCloud Drive is more than a terabyte.
Oh, wow.
So
you think it'll just cache more?
It'll just cache more and then have the exact same problem in, say, 3 months' time. And then option 2 is to go back to the Mac, which I have a sneaking suspicion I have this little niggle in my head that says that's the right thing to do.
Oh.
I know. Me, the iPad evangelist. Going back to the Mac.
Man. Well, maybe it's a RAM issue.
A RAM issue?
I was just thinking the 1 terabyte iPad Pro has a couple more gigabytes of RAM in it. And so maybe that would be enough RAM that when you're importing photos, they can all be imported to RAM and kept there while your iPad's clearing cache space for the import. So you wouldn't necessarily see the message that way.
I wasn't... Do you know that that's how it operates?
No.
It doesn't sound that likely that's how it would operate. That would actually keep things in RAM. Because what if you imported 4 gig of photos and then just turned it off?
Right.
I guess part of the turn off procedure is to write stuff from RAM to disk.
Man, you would also... I also feel like it's not how it works that it would keep a 1 terabyte invisible cache on the iPad.
Right. Right. Or even have 256 gig minus 100 gig. 156 gig of cache on my current iPad.
That
seems unlikely
as well. So it's not an issue I've encountered. I have the 512 iPad, but I also don't import photos very often, or ever actually. They only come in through my iCloud library. So maybe I circumvent that issue.
Yeah, whereas I'm using it more and more every week to import photos, as it's kind of becoming a job for me to be a photographer.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
that's exciting.
I am relying on it. I did have a job. Probably this is maybe the first or second time that it happened where I was away for the weekend with just the iPad and the camera, and I was trying to deliver the photos to the client during the spare time on the job because it was a whole weekend thing, and just constantly hitting iPad out of storage, have to restart and then try and import it again and then edit the photos, deliver them. It was a real speed bump in the whole process.
Yeah. If you're definitely, using it for professional endeavors like that, a MacBook might, be worth it in that case, just so you never have to worry about that issue.
Yeah, but it is like the only issue in that workflow, though, which is the frustrating part.
Right.
But, yeah, I think I am going to have to go back to the Mac for maybe another year or so, and then probably in 12 months I'll convince myself that iOS is indeed the future of computing, and get the 2021 iPad Pro, or whatever it happens to be.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what they do with the iPad Pro this year, and hopefully they really take some time to differentiate iPadOS some more. I think that getting it closer to a computer replacement is going to make it even more tempting.
Yeah, there's definitely room for improvement. I think mostly in terms of software, though. The hardware is just really nice.
Right. Yeah,
as good as it's ever been, and probably the flagship hardware that Apple is putting out at the moment, for sure, is the iPad Pro.
Yeah, that's fair. I love my iPad Pro.
I loved my iPad Pro.
Oh, man. But you're not having the touch issues anymore, at least.
Yeah, no, the replacement iPad that I got completely fixed those touch issues that I was having.
Man, yeah. Hopefully this year's hardware release, because it does seem to be a few bugs like that hopefully they can iron out this year.
Yeah, I wonder when we'll see new iPads. March is just around the corner.
Yeah. It's kind of a weird time for them to do the Pros, but also we're kind of running long since the last update, so, man, who knows at this point?
This is probably going to be like a minor update year where we just get a spec bump and better cameras. So, yeah, right. I can see something like that happening fairly soon.
Yeah, that'd be fair. Maybe they put the iPhone 11 Pro's like triple camera sensors on the iPad Pro, and
yeah, exactly.
Just a faster processor and call it an update.
Yep. They've certainly done stuff like that before.
I did see a rumor recently saying that there's potentially a new keyboard cover that's going to have like a backlit keyboard. Right.
Those rumors have been flying, haven't they?
Yeah. That'd definitely be something I'm interested in. That's what I miss the most with my current iPad is using it in the dark is not nearly as nice as having a MacBook.
I didn't have this generation of keyboard cover. I had the previous iPad Pro keyboard cover, which was attached to the 9.7-inch iPad Pro back in 2017, and I didn't find it nice to type on, but I have heard better things about the current one, despite it not being backlit. Just right. That, firstly being slightly bigger, you're not as cramped to type on it. And just the feedback on the keys is also a bit nicer.
I'm surprised people would say that. I had both, and I would say the keys almost feel identical.
Okay.
But I've always had the 12-inch iPads, so space has never been a concern, and it's completely comfortable for me to type on for long periods of time. I kind of like short travel keys, so it works well for me.
Speaking of keyboards, maybe we should jump into the first topic.
Good
morning.
Good morning.
The first topic is actually a director at which award event was this? The Grammys? The Oscars? Is that the same thing? The Oscars?
No, they're not the same thing.
I don't know anything about awards. Grammys are music awards, aren't they?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, Grammy, gramophone. So the Oscars, also known as the Academy Awards, am I right?
I do not know if that's true. I always assumed they were separate things, but I'm not a big film person, so I don't know.
Okay.
Not a good start.
Yeah, great start. But anyway, the director, Taika Waititi, hilarious guy, genius, basically. He had a little interview backstage, and he actually called out the MacBook keyboard as terrible. Basically, this was his interview, was ranting about how bad the Apple keyboard was. Although he wasn't talking specifically about failure rates or keys not working or double pressing. He was actually just talking about what you just mentioned, key travel. He says the key travel is too short for him. And so he's calling on the Screenwriters Guild, I think it was, to petition Apple for keys with more travel in their MacBook Pros. Interesting.
Man, you'd think... I guess I don't know the life of a writer, and maybe a laptop is the best tool for that because you can travel around and kind of get inspiration from your surroundings. But I felt like if my job was to write all the time, and it kind of is, I write software, and so I couldn't dream of doing that on a laptop all the time. I've got a really nice desk set up with a chair I'm comfortable sitting in and the keyboard I'm most comfortable to write with, and so I feel like a laptop doesn't really fit that niche, and I'm surprised someone who definitely writes way more than even I type would have, his own favorite keyboard that he types with and everything else.
Yeah, I don't imagine that. This is just completely based on nothing, but that people who are writing like this for movies and whatnot don't really have like an office to go to. I mean, are they even part of companies? I don't know. There must be writing companies, but a lot of them will be working freelance, either home offices or just as they travel around or getting together with other writers. And so it would make too much sense. What am I trying to say? You'd have to have a laptop. You couldn't get away with having a desktop computer. Although, I mean, the internet does exist, so they could use a computer at home and then a laptop somewhere else when they're out and about.
Sure. I mean, I don't think someone of the caliber of like Taika Waititi is necessarily doing like independent work. Like, he worked on Thor and Jojo Rabbit and things like that. So I think probably with big stuff like that, you probably have like a studio that you'd go into to work. Although, again, I'm making complete assumptions about what that kind of career is like.
Right. Yeah.
So there's probably a whole team of writers you got to work with, right? So you can't really sit at your desk at home or something necessarily.
No, but I think you would take it home and you would work on it at home, and then you'd go in the morning, and then maybe you'd go for a coffee and you'd be writing while you're having your coffee in the cafe as well. And then you'd get together in the big studio room and collaborate with all your ideas.
This reminds me of a topic we had on our second episode of the podcast. Do you remember this? We were talking about the script for the latest Star Wars movie was written on
That's right.
Just a MacBook Air that was completely like air gapped from the internet. So it's completely offline and kept in a safe when it wasn't being used.
Right. So, yeah, I remember that topic. So it must have been used by one person to write it.
Right. Or at least passed around.
And it wasn't connected to the internet, so it couldn't have synced anything to the cloud. So there's going to be no desktop that whoever wrote it. I don't know, was it J.J. Abrams who wrote it?
I'm not sure which of the movies we were talking about at the time. Was it a couple years ago? Would that have been The Force Awakens?
It would have been the first. Oh, yeah, good question, actually.
It wouldn't matter because I don't know who directed which one or wrote which one. So
I don't remember the names of them. I can tell you, J.J. Abrams directed the first and the third of the modern three.
Right.
That's about it. Anyway, so there was a single MacBook Air with no internet connection, kept in a safe. When it was not in use. Yeah, it just makes sense. It would be a lot harder to put a desktop in the safe when you weren't using it.
Yeah, I suppose that's fair. So maybe laptops do make a lot more sense for that kind of work. And for that, I would suggest to Taika Waititi the 16-inch MacBook Pro.
Yeah. And that's most of the comments in the thread just kind of pointing out that the problem has been solved. You can get the new 16-inch with better key feel, or better, I guess, is subjective, but more key travel, more reliable keyboard, and I wonder why it doesn't have it.
Yeah, but to be fair, this is a problem that should have been solved years ago across the entire lineup, and not just on their flagship, most expensive laptop.
Right.
So,
although his complaint is about key travel and not so much about reliability.
Right.
So it is still kind of a subjective thing and not necessarily something that could have been solved, in quotes.
It's definitely subjective, but also before 2016, it was pretty much, at least from what I remember reading, universally agreed on that Apple's keyboards were the best. So they had some kind of formula right that they have completely screwed up.
Yeah, that's true. They did have the best keyboards.
So, and I quite like the 16-inch MacBook Pro. I don't own one, but I've typed on one for a bit at like a Best Buy, and it feels much better, much closer to like what you get with an iMac.
Okay. I should really go and try it out.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll be the draw card.
The what?
Maybe it'll be a draw card for me to pick one up.
Oh, I see. Yeah, you gotta go big.
Maybe
right?
I shouldn't. Maybe my wallet will thank me if I don't test out that keyboard.
Is that what you think you'd do if you left the iPad? You'd go for the 16-inch?
It's an option, but number one issue is the cost. They're just still very expensive.
Right.
And number two is that I really like SD card readers. So I know that kind of really excludes a lot of computers for me, especially anything modern from Apple. But,
right.
I mean, it really is a minor... it's a minor feature that's a major convenience for me.
So you think you leave Apple entirely?
No, I don't think so. I might get like a top-of-the-line 2015 MacBook Pro or even MacBook Air if I could put up with having a non-Retina screen.
Right.
But yeah, I'm thinking along those lines at the moment.
Okay. I'm sure you get something like that for a pretty reasonable price at this point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And as a way of trialing out my Yasmin's laptop is actually a 2015 MacBook Air with an SD card slot, and well, that's one of the reasons I know I like having an SD card so much that I would sacrifice not having a computer made in the last 4 years for it. And then behind my back, I've got fingers crossed that Apple put the SD card slot back on something.
Oh, you're dreaming.
I am, I know, but I'll keep dreaming. I will keep dreaming.
All right. You know, there was a technology, I think this was probably at least 10 years ago. There was like SD cards with wireless transfer built into them. Do you remember those?
I tried that, yeah. Yep. Wi-Fi? No, iFi, sorry.
Yeah,
iFi
something
cards.
like that. Did those work very well?
They were dog slow when I tried it. This is probably almost going back a decade.
Right.
But it was kind of janky as well. Like the cards... So you'd have to connect the computer to the Wi-Fi network that the card put out, so you wouldn't have an internet connection while it was importing, and then the importing thing would take ages. So it was an inconvenience. Certainly wasn't as nice as having an SD card slot on the computer.
So Apple needs to invent like their own take on this with an SD card with like I don't know, AirDrop or something built into it.
Yeah. And 802.11 AC, or sorry, Wi-Fi 6, whatever it's called.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for now I'm thinking of just using this MacBook Air that's already in the house and as a trial method for at least a few weeks. See how it goes. Yasmin practically never uses it, so...
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
The one drawback to it, though, is it has a German keyboard, so... I've set it to US English, and I just have to touch type because half of the keys don't correspond to what I'm typing.
Do you use the US keyboard in Australia, or do you guys have a slightly different layout?
It's the US keyboard.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think there's any international keyboard. I think there's either like UK or US, like the two main options, and US is like 99% of them.
Okay. I think the thing I've seen different the most is like even if the keyboards are identical, it seems like if it's a non-US keyboard, it has the vertical enter key instead of the long horizontal one.
Yep, that's right. It's got the vertical one.
Huh.
Which I don't mind too much. It's a little bit annoying, but as long as there's like a double width backspace key, I'm pretty happy. I just can't get by with the single width backspace key you find on some keyboards.
Oh, right. Yeah. All right. Well, you have to let me know how your experiment goes.
Yeah, don't worry. I will for sure. I'm considering some other options as well, but maybe I'll save them for another show.
Okay. Fair enough.
So did you watch the review of the Apple Pro Display XDR by the HDTV review channel?
I did.
Good, because it's the next topic.
I was a little lost for a lot of it. He was mentioning a lot of like specific measurements and settings and things I wasn't familiar with. And it seemed like throughout the review, he used a lot of, like, he would say, like, some things were completely off about the display. He'd say some things were completely good. So I didn't know overall how it was holding up, and until the end of the review, I was kind of lost the whole time.
I was in the same boat. There were a lot of graphs with axes I didn't understand and things like that. But, I mean, there was one very obvious thing that made sense to me, was notably when he was showing the scenes of space,
right,
or the stars or whatnot, or anything really that showed a lot of black on the screen, you could instantly tell that the Sony screen showed black, whereas the Apple screen showed, like, grey.
Right. So, yeah, overall, it seemed like the consensus of the review is that this monitor is not an option at all for anyone who professionally works on photos and video, which was a bit of a surprise to me, at least based on how Apple had marketed it. But when you see the comparisons, it's obvious that there's definitely some places it's lacking. Now, if it's a $40,000 difference in performance, I think that's a question that would be fair to bring up if Apple had not directly compared these two monitors on stage.
Yeah, it's largely Apple's fault, isn't it?
Right.
I mean, they put a $5,000 monitor against a $40,000 monitor and said the $5,000 one will do everything you needed to do in comparison, which really isn't the case. But if they hadn't done that, we'd just be saying, well, this is an amazing $5,000 monitor, I think.
Right. Yeah. He did have a lot of praise for the monitor in bright scenes. He said the bright scenes for HDR are really good, and that people who he said specifically like YouTubers who want to make HDR content and aren't really worried about like dark performance, like if you're doing something like night sky shooting, it could be good for them. So maybe there is a niche there, but at the same time, I don't think Apple was targeting YouTubers with the Mac Pro.
You don't think they were targeting YouTubers? But they seeded all their review units to YouTubers, did they not?
I guess they did send all the reviews out to YouTubers. I think that's like a marketing thing, though. If they sent it out to I don't know, like Pixar. Pixar's not going to publish a review of the computer, so they just kind of gave Pixar a free computer.
Yeah, not known for their reviews, I think.
So maybe there's some kind of balance here, because even before this video, and I think even after, I would say that the Mac Pro itself is not even targeted towards like the prosumer market. It's really like firmly in the professional, like movie studio. Maybe the monitor itself isn't there, but I think the computer's still firmly within that category. And then this monitor kind of reflects where it's priced at still like above prosumer levels, but much closer to that than the $40,000 studio monitors.
So it's a weird split then, to definitely target one group with the computer and then not necessarily target them with the monitor, but almost get there. I don't know how movie studios work at all, but maybe the person that needs the blacks can have the Sony, and then, you know, everyone else working on, I don't know, animation or CG or whatever else can have the Apple display.
Right. Yeah, this is a question of is it close enough? And I don't want to pretend to know more than this guy, the reviewer, does, because he's clearly way more knowledgeable technically about performance of monitors than I am. But my understanding is currently these studio reference monitors are so expensive that people are usually working off of standard monitors, and then they put it onto the reference monitor when they want to review it and see how it looks. But they're not primarily working off of those because they're kind of low resolution and big and bulky. So if they have something closer to the performance of those reference monitors that can work off of primarily, that could still potentially be a benefit to them.
Okay. That sounds like a reasonable market to target then.
Right. I think that's fair, and I think maybe they just went a little overzealous with their marketing, saying it completely replaced the reference monitors.
The other thing that did make sense to me in the review was like when you had a really contrasty bright area against a dark area, you could just kind of see how the locally, what do you call it? The LEDs that you can turn on or off behind the screen.
Locally dimmable something backlight. I don't know.
Yeah. But you could tell that like the blacks around that bright area were kind of glowing a little bit more than you'd expect them to, like a little halo or halation effect.
Right. Yeah.
But with something that's fast moving, you might not see it as much as something that's still on the screen. But yeah, besides those 2 points, basically everything else was Greek to me.
Yeah, I felt the same way watching the review. So I was a little bit surprised to hear how definitively on the side of no, this monitor is not going to work for anyone he landed. Even after watching the review, I'm like, well, he's got a lot of nice things to say about it, so maybe he's going to say, it's not great, but it's worth the price. But he's just like, no one can work with this. So
yeah, he basically just shot it in the head at the end of the review. That's it.
Right. And yeah, I don't know enough to argue about that, so I'm definitely taking his word for it. But yeah, I think maybe in the case of just a day-to-day or not when you're trying to do reference monitor work, it could be still better than the alternatives that people are currently working with.
Well, speaking of day-to-day and alternatives, how about a monitor that costs half the price and maybe is not quite as good as the Apple Pro display, but for half the price, I reckon they would sell more than double the amount.
Are you talking about something that exists, or are you talking about a theoretical monitor?
A theoretical Apple monitor, maybe non-XDR, maybe just an Apple Pro display, 30-inch, 5K or 6K, something like that.
Yeah. If you start talking about something in half the price, at that size and resolution, it'd fly off the shelves. Everyone with a Mac and even probably some PCs that could work with it would be buying those. What's the selling rate of a 6K monitor? $2,500 sounds really reasonable.
Yeah, I didn't do any research into what that price point would be. But why not just pull a panel off one of the computers they already sell, a 5K panel off an iMac, rip the guts out of it, sell it as a display.
Isn't the LG Ultrafine using the same panel from the iMac?
Yeah, I'm not sure actually.
I think that was my understanding at the time, but I might be misremembering. It's been a few years since they released them. But I believe that was the case, is it's the same panel from the iMacs.
But do you really want an LG display on your desk?
It's not very pretty going with the rest of your setup. Especially with the weird kind of like big forehead with a webcam built in, and I assume they've gotten this fixed by now, but I remember some issues when it was released. Like there was like a big sheet of metal in it that was like blocking Wi-Fi signals. Right.
Yeah, that was fixed fairly quickly, but
okay.
There was some sort of... I thought there was like an effect on the screen when it was near a Wi-Fi point.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe it's just blocking them.
And then it's just plastic. If you're paying $1,300 for a display, that's more than even Apple's Cinema displays were, and those were all aluminum. So to pay more, even though it's 5K, so you're getting a lot more display, it still kind of feels like a downgrade to put a piece of plastic on your desk.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, so how about that iMac display? Now, iMacs have SD card ports, don't they? Interesting.
Do the current ones still?
I thought so. Yeah, they do. iMac Pros do, at least.
Yeah, I bet you're right. Let's say I think mine does, but mine's quite a few years old now at this point.
Okay. So the European Parliament has officially voted in favour of the universal charger for smartphones. And I can't work out if they're talking about the brick or the phone. Because I read the proposal.
Right.
It doesn't really specify.
You'd think someone somewhere would know, but I have not been able to find a definitive answer anywhere on what they're talking about.
Surely, though, if you just apply a bit of common sense, they're talking about both ends or the phone end.
You'd think that just because that's the only reason it would even make sense to be arguing about this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm worried about what this means for the future. Because this has been a long time coming that they've been working on this ruling. So, and this is an argument that's been brought up in the comments and we've discussed in the past, but when the next standard comes out, USB-C becomes old news and too slow or whatever else, is the EU going to have to form another committee to decide whether or not to adopt USB-D while the rest of the world's been on it for years? And I don't know what the long-term implications of this are.
Someone in the comments, here we go, Yaztromox says the logical solution would be for the decider of which port it is to be the USB implementers forum. So that way it would be with them to say, oh, all right, so we've got USB-C, it's going to be the standard from 2021 until 2026, and then USB-D will then take over all phones manufactured from this point on. It'll be USB-D until 2036 or whatever. And that'll be the ones to do it. But
I mean, that's a little bit, I mean, not even a little bit, that's definitely giving them kind of a monopoly. Because what if the next best port to come out is Lightning? Or not Lightning, but let's say Intel comes up with a new version of Thunderbolt 4, and it uses like a connector that's half the size of USB-C port, and they don't adopt the USB port as the form factor. That'd be really easy then for that to kind of be blocked, and USB to say no, we're going to use our new USB-D port instead, and kind of control the market that way.
But the USB implementers forum, I mean, Intel is part of that.
Okay. So
that group is made up of Apple, Intel, Microsoft, blah, blah, blah.
Okay.
So
maybe that wouldn't end up being an issue then.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know. If Intel came up with something like so much better than USB, I kind of find it hard to imagine that they'd just give it away to the implementers forum.
Right.
If it wasn't an improvement on USB. So yeah, okay. Yeah, I can see the point.
So because they did use DisplayPort as the connector of choice for the first two versions of Thunderbolt. So they definitely don't have to go with USB standard for the next one either. But I don't know. This seems a little bit like government overreach to me. I don't know what problem
that's the EU. Of course you would see it as that. You live in the United States of America.
Man, just because, and this is my problem with the government getting involved in any form of technology. It's the same with my government trying to regulate back doors into all encryption and stuff. It's just that no one, it seems like no one in a position of government has a solid understanding of technology, and yet they're making laws and big decisions about how it should work without maybe fully understanding the repercussions.
Right, yeah. I mean, the head honchos, well, from last show, you remember the chief, this isn't government, but the chief technology officer of Facebook.
Right.
Didn't know how to say operating system.
Yeah, it wasn't technology officer. I think hopefully their chief technology officer will be able to. It was like their chief communications or marketing person. But
okay,
yeah.
All right, he's forgiven then. But the point being that, higher up, it's not necessarily has the detail at the nitty gritty level to make an appropriate decision.
Right.
So, are we voting for free market? I bet Apple votes for free market.
I'm sure they would. I would lean that way. I wonder how much of this will actually be an issue, because I think USB-C is going to be the connector until the next connector is no connector. So I don't know how much of an issue this is actually going to pose in the future. Assuming that this law doesn't like require that every device has that connector, because that would be a separate issue entirely. But yeah, I think wireless is going to be feasible before like a significant replacement USB-C comes about.
I think those are the biggest questions about the next iPhone. Does it have USB-C or no connector? And does it have a notch or not? They're my biggest questions.
For this year's iPhone?
For this year's iPhone.
Man, I bet there's no way they've gotten rid of the notch yet. I think there's still going to be a notch. I'm going to maybe go out on a limb and say they're going to have USB-C. And that's versus Lightning. I don't think that wireless is on the table yet.
No true wireless. Yeah. If they'd kept the headphone jack, then maybe they could go true wireless.
And use the headphone jack as like a diagnostic port.
Yeah, and for people that still like to plug in headphones.
Oh, man. Yeah, that's what they need to do, is they need to get rid of the Lightning port and just put a headphone jack back in there.
Imagine. That would be insane.
To make you charge
the headphone just completely lost the plot.
Yeah.
Well, there were some Apple devices that used headphone jack for charging data transfer.
Yeah, the Shuffle.
And audio. Yeah, iPod Shuffle.
So, it's definitely doable.
And pigs might fly.
Yeah.
So the new Apple Maps and CarPlay has had some recent improvements, and you'll probably have to tell me about these, considering that the improvements are only in North American Apple Maps, and I don't have CarPlay.
Right. Well, these pictures posted by Boss Hog GA really kind of summarize it. The new Apple Maps has just a lot more detail, first of all, everywhere you go. Kind of like the foliage and the buildings and the roads are all better defined now. If you have a turn coming up, it'll specify, if it's at a stop sign or at stop lights. I don't live in a big enough city that I have 3D models of buildings on my Apple Maps. But it's still fun to fly around and take a look at those. Not like it was, 5 years ago or so when flyover was the new cool thing.
That no one used.
Right. But I think Apple Maps has definitely matured, at least in the United States, I don't know about anywhere else, to a point where I've completely replaced Google Maps with it, which is not something that I felt comfortable doing until probably within the last year or so. As a matter of fact, when I go somewhere I'm not familiar with, I still favored Google Maps until just recently.
I would, exactly the same. If I'm going somewhere I'm not familiar with, I would usually choose Google Maps because I have more faith that it's going to get it right.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Apple Maps, I would, if it was, an address in a suburb that I knew basically how to get to, then I'd have pretty good faith that if Apple Maps was taking me in the wrong direction, that I'd recognize that and be able to correct it without, going too far off route. But there have been a few things added to Google Maps recently that keep pulling me back, even for just general day-to-day stuff.
Okay.
And that's the addition of a speed camera alerts or warnings. Like, if you see a mobile speed camera on the side of the road, you can report it, and then when other people are coming up to it, they'll get an alert that you're coming up to it.
And you can do that. Is that a feature from Waze that they have brought over into the main Google Maps app?
Yeah, I'm fairly sure it was in Waze, although I never used it more than a couple of times.
Huh.
But I remember using a feature like this back in iPhone 4 days. I'm trying to remember what it was called. But it was basically a speed camera reporting, red light camera reporting app, and that was kind of all it did. I don't even think it did navigation. So you'd get in the car, put the phone on the dash, and just open this app, and it would just kind of follow you along and give you a heads up when you're coming to a speed camera. Which, like, probably isn't a recommended way to drive, because it means you're probably driving too fast everywhere. I'll just put that out there.
Yeah.
But now Google Maps has this built right into it.
Speed camera reporting, police reporting, that seems like things that I don't think Apple would ever implement, just because, like you said, I think it encourages bad driving.
Right.
And for,
yeah, there are negative connotations with these sort of features.
A company like Apple, who kind of like acts as a parent sometimes in terms of like what's allowed on the App Store and things like that, I think police reporting is one of those things that they probably would never put in Apple Maps. Although if they were, CarPlay would be a great place for it. You just have one button on your dash, just press it like I just passed a police officer, fiddling with a phone or anything else. It would work great. But
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I don't see them doing that, not just anytime in the near future, but just ever.
There is one sort of related item to that, which is reporting car traffic accidents, which I don't think you can report a traffic accident with Apple Maps. I know that when like the motorway authority or whatever they're called knows about an accident, then it will pop up in Apple Maps.
Right.
But I don't think there's any user reporting side to it.
Yeah, I don't believe so either. The best indication you get of an accident coming up would be just the indication that traffic is slowing down ahead.
Yep.
But yeah, I don't think.
And the other feature that keeps me coming back to Google Maps is just business listings, because they're still absolutely trash in Apple Maps, even though they use Yelp, they use Foursquare. I don't know what else they use. It seems to be country dependent what their source is. But they also have the Apple Business Directory. But they're still trash compared to Google Maps. And we've covered this in the past, how good Google is at promoting user submissions and user corrections and just fostering a whole community around listings. It's really going to be hard for Apple to get anywhere near the quality of that.
Yeah, I mean, if they wanted to, they would have to do the same thing Google's doing and start their own like database of businesses and reviews and stop relying on third parties.
Well, they do have their own database, but it's not like something that you can review.
Right. Yeah. Man, that's the problem is even today when Apple Maps is finally maturing to a point of being trustworthy, usable, is all these years of playing catch up. Google's just gotten so far ahead, and I think even at this point, Apple should really just patch things up with Google and like maybe combine their data and make a really good Google Maps. But that's never going to happen.
That would be the silver bullet to Apple's problem, is to team up with Google, just import their listings. But after how it went last time,
right? I
don't know if it's ever going to happen.
Man, the golden days when Google Maps and YouTube came pre-installed on your iPhone.
Oh man.
So yeah, they're too far into this now. They've dug themselves down too deep to say we were wrong. Please be our native mapping solution again. And
well, I bet the issue is more with Google saying, well, if you want to integrate our results, then we're going to need to know who the user is, where they were, when they looked up the result, where they were going,
that's fair
what
too.
they ate for breakfast, their wife's middle name,
right?
etc., etc. If you can supply that information, then you can integrate our business listings.
Right. I mean, what was the initial issue that stemmed Apple Maps? Because it was turn-by-turn directions. Google wasn't allowing Apple to use it in their Maps app unless, I don't know if they wanted more money or they wanted more branding or what, but I don't remember it being a user privacy issue at that time.
No, I don't remember exactly. But yeah, there was no turn-by-turn, there was no vector maps.
Right.
For a long time because of whatever the dispute was.
So, yeah, I'm sure if Apple came back to Google at this point, they'd only have a stronger case for asking for more. So they're pretty much stuck between a rock and a hard place. Just got to keep iterating on Apple Maps and hopefully they can catch up someday.
Well, how does Google Maps work on CarPlay? Does it have an interface?
It does. It has its own CarPlay app. I think I pulled it up once just to see what it looked like, but it's been years. I don't even remember at this point.
Okay.
Well, I don't think years is the right answer because I think it was just added either last year or the year before, and I took a look at it because Apple just recently allowed mapping applications on CarPlay. So
right. So what are your hesitations to actually using Google full time? Then mine, I would say, are just brand loyalty, which is kind of a stupid reason, but also probably on the other hand, thinking that if I get directions to KFC, I'm going to be seeing KFC ads when I get home on my computer. That sort of fear, which may be kind of not justified, but maybe it is.
I mean, brand loyalty probably plays into it a little bit. I think bigger is just a little bit of convenience. It's the difference between just saying, hey Siri, take me to the nearest, whatever, KFC or whatever, versus having to open the Google Maps app and type it in or anything else. So
but you can ask for Google Maps directions with Siri.
Oh, can you?
Yeah. Actually, this is very new to me as well. So I don't. I forgive you for not knowing, but you can just say, "Yo Siri, get directions to blah blah address in Google Maps," and it will just do the thing in Google Maps.
Oh man. Okay, well, I don't know then. I guess brand loyalty is a big part of it. and ignorance, apparently.
Brand loyalty and ignorance. Two qualities that I'm not too sure about.
That's pretty much any Android user would define an Apple fan.
Exactly.
Man. Yeah. And the real fact of the matter is I don't use navigation very much at all.
No.
Like, it's only if I'm going into, like, a big city and I need to find a specific business that I'm not familiar with. And in those cases, I trust Apple just fine because their mapping in big cities is as good as anyone. It's like the little rural things. I'm going to someone's house out in the country or something that I'd probably opt for Google Maps because their non-big city mapping is generally better, or at least it was. I don't know. Maybe I'll have to give the Google Maps thing a try now that I know that Siri can do that for you.
I wonder if that works in CarPlay as well.
I did see that the just standard Google app for iOS got Siri shortcut integrations added within the last week or two.
Ah, did it? Oh, that's something to play with.
So you can literally set up something that says like, "Yo Siri, search for this on Google," and it'll open the Google app and just do a search for you. So kind of making Siri a little smarter. I wonder how. I haven't looked at the. I don't even have the Google app, but I wonder if you could even say like, "Search for this" with the Google Assistant. Basically, just use Siri as a middleman.
Yeah. Once upon a time, I had a shortcut where I could just say, "Yo Siri, hey Google," and it would open up the Google Assistant. But of course, the phone had to be authenticated already to be able to open up the app.
Right. Yeah, that's the big limitation.
Speaking of shortcuts, did you get anywhere with our challenge from last show, which was to create like a morning routine where it would, where Siri or HomePod or whatever you're using would read from multiple news sources, a la Google Home?
To be honest, I completely forgot about that challenge.
Okay.
What about you?
I didn't manage to do it, but not because of the reason I thought. I thought, like, I'm not sure how I could do this in shortcuts, but it turns out doing the shortcut part of it isn't the problem. The problem is finding any news sources that I could actually stick into the shortcut. It seems that the one, like, if you ask Siri to play it now, it'll play the news via the podcast app, but it doesn't actually exist in a podcast in the podcast app as like a podcast to play. So then I was like, all right, I'll just search for like news bulletins, and there's one or two, but like not from any major news source that I'd actually want to listen to. So yeah, the problem is actually finding the source of the news to be able to play it, not the actual fact of trying to get it to play.
Huh. Yeah, there almost needs to be an app that can collect those like short news segments that you can then reference.
Yeah. So if any listeners know of any like 2 to 3 minute news bulletin type podcasts, or I guess audio sources of any sort, it'd be good to know, to try and create some sort of morning routine.
Yeah, I wonder if there's some kind of RSS feed of like news that you could tap into somewhere.
Right. It'd be way easier if it was in the podcast app, but yeah, an RSS feed is probably usable in some way as well.
Right. Yeah, because what Google does in the mornings is excellent. So it's like a selection of news segments from like I get Reuters and BBC One and like a tech news briefing, and it's great in the mornings.
Yeah, my only complaint about Google is it plays at all different volume levels, which is a bit annoying. Like I get the ABC and it's nice and loud, and then it goes to the BBC and they're talking like they're quite British accents, and you can barely make out what they're saying.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely an issue for me as well, especially trying to listen to those while taking a shower.
Yeah. So iOS 13.4 features a new mail toolbar, fixing the bad design introduced with iOS 13. I like how 9to5Mac just calls it bad design straight out. Just speak the truth. Because it's a terrible design. I don't understand how... Well, maybe it's because Apple doesn't have focus groups, that no one like, in a focus group would point out, like, where's everything gone? Oh, that's way worse than it was before. But even using common sense, surely the person coding that design, or not coding it, but what do you call it? Wireboarding that design? Testing the usability of that design would realise that it's just making it worse. They left... I mean, what did it change to? A delete button and a reply button, and then this undiscoverable slide over effect, and then leave half the toolbar just empty for no apparent reason.
Yeah, and such a weird like UI that doesn't match anything else. We got two buttons right next to each other on one side of the bottom, and then there's a big blank space. And when it was first introduced, like the delete button, it was actually switched in place from where it originally was as well, which is even stupider. And the fact that they're going back to it, I don't know if this is them responding to criticism, or if there was something else intended to go down there in that area that they had to cut at the last minute and maybe thought they were going to bring back and then just haven't. And so they're reverting to the old design. But even from beta 1, it was empty. Right. It's not like there was something there and then it disappeared. Yeah. Maybe they wanted to force people to find the new UI, which does have more options. And now they think that everyone knows it's there. We can put the other buttons back, and they'll still know where to find it. Yeah, exactly. Oh man, yeah. I'm happy that's coming back, and I wish I could come up with some kind of justification for the old bad design. But there's no excuse for whatever they did before. No, there's nothing, is there? So, but I'm glad they've come to their senses now. I didn't actually see any other major sort of features in 13.4 that were worth talking about, but that was kind of it. Yeah, there's like iCloud folder sharing was the big one that I saw.
Ah, that's right. Yeah.
Because that could potentially make sharing episodes between us easier in the future.
Yep, that would be nice.
Yeah. So, what else is there? Oh, this is something that was exciting for me. You can remap modifier keys for the iPad keyboard.
Ah, so like switching control and caps lock or something like that?
Right, which is what I do. I have my caps lock key mapped to control on all my keyboards. And then when I use it on the iPad, I'm constantly hitting caps lock and messing myself up.
Yeah, okay. That's a nice little feature to come.
For developers, this is kind of cool. iOS now has a on key press event and on key release for iPad keyboards. Before, there was no way for game designers or app makers to know when you were pressing and releasing a key, and now they do know that. So that'll be potentially allow games to be controlled with the keyboard on iPad.
Okay. Yep.
So those were the exciting takeaways for me.
All fairly niche things, but signs that iPad OS is maturing.
Yeah. Yeah, the key events is big in terms of moving to a UI where you could completely use the iPad without actually touching the screen anymore between the mouse and keyboard shortcuts and stuff.
Yeah. Do I really want to jump ship at this point?
Maybe we should wait and see what the next iPad Pro looks like.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't matter what it looks like. It might still have that bug.
That's true. Well, they come with a 2 terabyte iPad Pro. Maybe it'll solve your problem anyway.
Yeah.
It reminds me of...
I just need an iPad Pro with more storage than my entire iCloud library of photos and documents.
This reminds me of the game Donkey Kong 64 for the Nintendo 64. Are you familiar with that? Are you familiar with the story behind it?
No, not at all.
So Donkey Kong 64 had a memory leak issue that would cause the game to crash when it ran out of space. And they were right up on the release day, and they didn't want to push it. And so their solution to this memory leak issue was to require the Nintendo 64 RAM expansion pack. And I think they even included it with almost all copies of the game when it was sold. And that, I think, doubled the RAM of your Nintendo 64 at the time. And basically increased your playtime to 8 hours before the memory leak would cause the game to crash.
Ah, okay.
So that was their solution to that bug. And you could have the same solution just by getting some more storage on your iPad.
So they didn't actually fix the bug, and it was just extending the amount of time that you could play because the memory would continue to leak, but it just wouldn't fill up for longer.
Right.
That's genius. Yeah, maybe. Last on the list of hot topics for the week, there's actually quite a few topics to choose from since we last spoke. But this was actually, I think, one of the top ones, that Apple has added the ability for developers to sell Mac and iOS apps as a single purchase. I don't think they've actually added it yet, but I think it's coming in the next update to macOS and iOS.
Right, yeah.
Let me just double check that. Yeah, it's in the latest betas, so not yet, but soon.
Yeah, that's I think that was one of the big complaints that I remember from last year when Catalina was released. And a big step towards unifying all the platforms.
It does mean that developers are potentially making less money, though, because instead of selling 2 apps, they're selling 1.
Well,
but if Apple is pushing developers seemingly to sell apps as subscriptions rather than outright purchases, then I guess it doesn't really matter too much.
Right.
If anything, it's enticing users to pay a subscription because they know they'll get 2 for 1 instead of paying 2 subscriptions, which is less likely to happen.
Right. And this is in no way forcing developers to do that. They can always still sell a desktop and iOS app separately if they want, but it's nice to have that option for those who would like to have a unified experience. Because it's been the case for years, where like the Duet app on the Mac is free, and then you pay $10 for the iPad one to kind of cover the cost of both or something. So to be able to just have one purchase that gets everything, I think makes a little bit more sense.
And some bigger companies, Adobe is what I have in mind, is kind of already doing that with their subscriptions. Like you just pay for the Creative Cloud subscription and you have all the apps on macOS, all the apps on iOS, and even on Windows if you want it as well.
Right. Yeah, subscriptions pretty much already solves that problem. The same way with the Microsoft Office stuff. Like I use the 1Password password manager, and the apps are free, but you pay for the subscription across all of them. So in a lot of ways, this problem's already been solved for those big companies, and it's the little developers that this will help out more than anyone.
Yeah, okay. Breathing a bit more life into macOS.
Yeah. Yeah, with Catalina and these unified purchases, hopefully, the Mac App Store can finally flourish after all these years.
I would love to see Ferrite, so the app that I edit our podcast in, come to the Mac. I think that would be good. There's nothing really like it. Maybe Audacity comes closest.
Yeah, but I can't even run Audacity anymore because it's a 32-bit app.
Right, it's not compatible with Catalina, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there might be some other options. I just was so sold on Audacity that when it was gone, I just started using the Voice Memos app and haven't even looked for another solution.
Yeah, I don't think the Voice Memos is quite as full features as Audacity.
No, not at all.
But Voice Memos does sync with your watch and phone and iPad, Mac.
Yeah, and it has lossless recording, which is all I need since I'm not the one who edits the show together.
And there are pro options, of course, on the Mac, but for the most part, they are definitely overkill for editing a podcast.
Right. Yeah, I wonder, man, what LumaFusion would look like if it was ported to the Mac. If it had it's a relatively cheap app compared to Final Cut Pro, and it would blow iMovie out of the water.
Yeah, it certainly has more features than iMovie does.
Mm-hmm. So I'd love,
but nowhere near as many as Final Cut Pro.
Right. So I'd love to see something like that. Just all these powerful iPad apps have been brought over to the Mac, and vice versa. I'd love to see more Mac stuff brought to the iPad as well.
Yeah. Such as Final Cut Pro.
That would really solidify Apple's, investment in the iPad being the future of computers, and bring me Final Cut Pro.
Well, how about this? Xcode.
Yeah.
Yeah. The reverse happened in a fashion yesterday. Swift Playgrounds came to the Mac.
Right. Which is interesting to me that it hasn't always been here. Also slightly confusing in naming because there already is a Playgrounds application that's been in Xcode for years. The Xcode Playgrounds, but it's very different than Swift Playgrounds.
Oh, yeah. Completely different things.
So a little bit confusing in terms of naming there. But, yeah, you'd almost think that Swift Playground should have started on the Mac and then got ported over to iPad. That would make a little bit more sense than teaching people how to write in Swift on the iPad only to tell them, well, now you got to buy a Mac.
Yeah. Maybe that was the strategy.
Yeah.
I'm James VDM on Reddit and Twitter.
And I'm Jellywoot on Reddit and Twitter.
And we have a subreddit, reddit.com/r/the_Apple Wait, is that it?
Yeah.
reddit.com/r/the Yeah, it is. Yeah, that's the one. Where we actually got a comment last show.
Did we?
Oh, you didn't see? Yeah. Thanks for... fellow Beal clarified that the quote from the Facebook employee is Nick Clegg used to be the Deputy Prime Minister of the UK. So yeah, he definitely had no idea what he was talking about. The operate.
Jeez. It just
Deputy Prime Minister of the UK.
just reinforces my statement that people in government just don't know anything about technology.
Exactly.
So, are you a fan of Breaking Bad?
I've tried to watch it a few times, and I think I made my way through the first season once, but then didn't continue. So
Okay.
I couldn't say I was, sorry.
All right, fair enough. I went to visit my brother this weekend, and he lives in Albuquerque where the show is filmed.
Uh-huh.
So I drove around a little bit and did a little bit of sightseeing, and man, the house that they filmed it at is completely different now. They've redone all the yard work and repainted the house, and they've put a new roof on it. But most significantly, it's got 2 metal fences around it. One at the property line and one that's just like around the front door. And big signs that say, "Take your photos from across the street."
Wow. But are people living in it or what?
Yeah, there's still someone who lives there.
Oh, right.
So,
Those poor people.
I think in the first season, Walter is, well, maybe it's later in the show, but there's a scene where Walter is kicked out of the house by his wife, and he has a pizza in his hand, and he gets angry and throws the pizza, and the pizza lands on his roof. And apparently, tourists thought it was funny to bring pizzas and throw pizzas on this person's roof.
Of course they did. Bloody tourists, eh?
So yeah, to the point that Vince Gilligan, the writer of the show, had a tweet like, "You guys aren't being funny or original. Leave this person alone." And it apparently had to the point where pizza grease had damaged the roof, and I can only imagine that's why they put a metal roof on the house.
Oh my god!
So
wow,
yeah, it's not recognizable, and it's kind of sad to look at and think man, to live that way where you got to go through 2 gates to get into your house and constantly worried about people vandalizing your property, and you'd
I wonder if the value of the house has gone up or down because of it.
I had this discussion with my coworkers today. I think the show's been off the air for almost 10 years now, but man, when the show was at its peak or right when it was ending, that's when you should have just sold the house and moved, because someone would pay a ton for that at that point.
Yeah, probably.
And now it's just, maybe someone still would, but it's, from a 10-year-old TV show, interest is gone. It's just the house that still gets vandalized a bunch and maybe not as valuable anymore.
Yeah, right.
So, yeah, but what a life.
What's going to be the next location like that? I mean, Game of Thrones, they've got some locations from that still there.
Right.
But
I mean, so Better Call Saul is still running. As a matter of fact, a new season is about to start this month. Maybe there'll be some iconic locations from there. I think the season 5 is about to start, and there's nothing super iconic that comes to mind so far. They do start every season of Better Call Saul starts with a flash forward to after Breaking Bad.
Right.
Where it's supposed to be Saul is allegedly working at a Cinnabon in a mall in Omaha. But it's actually filmed right in Albuquerque as well. And I went to go see that Cinnabon. That'd be kind of cool to see. The Cinnabon's out of business. The mall's, it's gone.
Oh, damn.
So now every time they need to film a scene in there, they have to rebuild that Cinnabon on a soundstage.
Is Cinnabon like cinnamon buns?
Yeah. Cinnabon basically sells cinnamon rolls. That's their main thing. But it's more of a they general bakery. They have a lot of desserts.
How's bun spelled? B-O-N or B-U-N?
B-O-N. Cinnabon.
B-O-N. Oh, Cinnabon. Cinnabon. Okay. So it's not like cinnamon bun. Something a bit different.
Right. Yeah. C-I-N-N-A-B-O-N.
Cinnabon.
So it's a bakery that's only found in malls around here, and Their main thing they sell is just like cinnamon rolls.
Okay. Nice. What else is new?
New with me? I don't know. I haven't done anything recently. What about you?
Okay. What am I doing?
I did see your...
Went away for a wedding last weekend.
Oh, yeah? Was that... were you a photographer there? Was that part of your work?
It was my cousin's wedding, but she did ask me to take photos like on the side, not as the official photographer, who was like an actual pro.
Right.
But actually tomorrow I'm going an hour and a half north of Perth to be the primary photographer at another wedding up there.
You need to get
It's going to be this weekend.
You need to get a drone to start shooting weddings.
Oh, no, I'm like the opposite. I'm old fashioned.
I did see your video you just posted recently comparing the Nikon with it was another brand I wasn't familiar with.
Oh, Contacts.
Contacts.
Yeah, it doesn't really exist anymore.
Yeah. Man, between $100 camera and $1,000 camera, there were definitely a few shots where the Contacts really shined, but for the most part, they looked pretty comparable to my untrained eye.
No, they are quite comparable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you're only ever going to be looking at them on a screen, I think you'd just be fine with the Nikon, but there's like a 1980s Nikon for the listeners. But if you're ever planning to blow it up to, I don't know, like a poster or to put on your wall or something, then you might want something a little bit better. But then, like, I don't know. Yeah, was it worth like $900 more? I'd probably say no.
Right. Yeah, especially not worth, risking losing or damaging something that valuable.
Yeah. And these cameras are known just to die because they're electronics from the 90s. So they're like 30 years old now.
Right.
Yeah. And basically unrepairable.
So, and especially if you're, I mean, I don't know anything about photography, but I mean, if you're shooting with cameras that old, you're going for a certain effect anyway. You're not looking for necessarily the highest quality photos to come out of stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
So, in a way, you might be able to achieve kind of that desired effect better with a cheaper camera.
Yeah, you could do. Some of the top like wedding photographers in the world also use Contacts, but it's like a $5,000 Contacts, which is also known just to die. So, but yeah, it does give a special sort of effect. The effect mostly comes from the lens, though. So some people tend to just put vintage lenses on digital cameras and kind of get the same sort of feel to it at a much cheaper, I guess, end result, because you can take 1,000 photos for free at that point.
Right. So do you have all of the equipment necessary then to, if you're going to shoot these weddings with old film cameras, to get that printed and converted to a digital format? Or do you have to...
Yeah, so I've got a Canon 6D, so that's like a fairly typical digital wedding camera. Mm-hmm. And then I've got some medium format film cameras as well, which is normally what you shoot a wedding on in film if you're going to do that. But then, yeah, once I've shot the film, then it just goes off to a lab to be processed and scanned and comes back to me as JPEG.
Okay, so you don't have like a dark room where you're developing these yourself or anything?
I do, but I don't think I'd risk it if I was actually being paid to shoot for someone, because, my success rate's like 95% and you need it a little bit more if someone's paying you to shoot it.
Yeah.
Like their lifetime memories.
Yeah.
I'd want like a 99% chance of it working.
Yeah, the 5% where it comes out poorly is like the moment of the first kiss or something.
Yeah, exactly. No thanks. I would not want that stress. Plus, it takes ages to do. Like, I'm happy to do one roll,
right?
Of family photos. But if I've got like a dozen rolls, it's gonna take me like a dozen hours.
You could achieve the same thing with just an Instagram filter on your iPhone photos.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just save you some time and money there.
Yeah. So like a black and white filter with a grain effect.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I'll put that forward to the next client. Ask me to do their wedding.
You just shoot it with your iPhone SE.
I've discovered a new niche: iPhone SE wedding photography.
I mean, someday, 30, 40 years from now, that's going to be the vintage camera people are shooting with.
Maybe. I'd be a little surprised, but yeah, it could be.
I mean, there's no unique effect you're getting with an iPhone camera, so I can't imagine necessarily, but
no, probably not.
Kind of a bit of...
And I was looking... Yeah.
Oh, I was going to say a bit of big news that we didn't get to touch on the show. Did you see that Mobile World Congress was canceled?
Yeah, because of the coronavirus.
Yeah, that's a big deal. It's a huge event every year. I think like the world's largest... I think at least cell phone event, if not tech event in general. And a lot of new devices are unveiled there. So for that to be canceled is big news, I guess.
Yeah.
It's scary.
And also Mac Pro shipments are delayed, supposedly because of the coronavirus as well.
Yeah, I did. I was just reading about that. Man, I wonder what other industries this is going to affect before it runs its course.
Yeah, who knows? iPhone, maybe.
Oh, well, now I'm just scrolling through headlines. Essential phones shutting down.
Because of coronavirus or just because of it?
No.
Because it's essential phone.
No, the company itself is shutting down. Like, not the shipments be delayed, but like...
Okay.
I think Andy Rubin is the coronavirus of essential phone. Are you familiar with everything surrounding him?
Yeah. 100%.
That's surprising to me because he did tweet like a teaser of a new phone they were working on a few months ago. It was like a really long, skinny kind of phone with like a gloss back to it.
That's right, the long, skinny phone.
Yeah. So I guess that's not going to happen now.
Disappointing. I was really looking forward to that that like remote control sized phone in my hand.
Yeah. And
you know what else we didn't talk about? Samsung had an event 2 days ago.
Lots of big stuff coming out of that.
Man, they've done very typical Samsung in that their new phone has like all these really, really high-end new amazing features, but there's a little asterisk after every one. Like, the phone is now 120 hertz, amazing, but actually when you get it out of the box, it's only going to be 90 or 60 or whatever, and if you want 120 hertz, you have to go into the settings and you have to set it to a 1080p display mode, and then you'll get 120 hertz.
Right.
And then, it takes 8K video. Amazing, awesome, like, everyone wants that. But actually, you have to go into the settings and you have to set it to this, like, specific lens on the camera, which is actually, like, a 3 times crop zoom or something to get the 8K video. So, yeah, very typical Samsung fashion to have all these amazing features with tiny caveats.
Right. And not to mention the price tag. Like, the S20 starts at, like, $1,000. Making the iPhone look like an extremely affordable option.
Yeah, times have changed. There was an interesting article on Daring Fireball about phone prices the other day as well.
Oh, yeah?
Basically saying that, what was it, the gist of it? Comparing or complaining about like $1,000 phones. Like tech reviewers will complain about a $1,000 phone. But they'll say like a $1,000 laptop is justified, whereas in fact people are more likely to have like a $400 laptop and a $1,500 phone these days.
Right.
So it's kind of the opposite of, well, it is the opposite of how it used to be. Cheap phone, expensive computer. Everyone's doing the opposite now. So tech reviewers or the internet should really catch up with how we think about the price of these products.
That's a fair argument. I mean, I've been justifying my phone purchases for years just with the fact that, you know, my iPhone is the product that I own that I use more than anything else. Across, I'm sure any category. I don't use anything else more than my iPhone. So $1,000, $1,200 a year, you know, if you divide that up among the amount of time that I spend with that device, it starts to make a lot of sense.
Yeah, yep, sure does. And you can subsidize that cost by reselling the old iPhone that you're not using, or
Right.
pass it to your partner or whatever.
Right. Yeah. And iPhones have always held their values better than anything else. So,
Yep.
what did you think about the Z Flip?
Interesting little phone.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't find the presentation all that inspiring.
Right.
The display on the front of it seems a little too small. Like you'd always just basically want to be using it open. But that's how we used phones for a long time. Like we would always just flip them open and start using them. It's just part of the process.
That's true, yeah.
Although the Razr had a fairly, not a big display, but had a decent display on the front.
Bigger than the Z Flip has.
Yeah, bigger than the Z Flip.
So I like that it has...
Or the Z Flip, sorry.
Oh, of course. I like that it has flagship specs compared to the new Razr, which is extremely mid-range. I'm very curious about this glass, this bendable glass they're using. Because this is innovation that I wasn't aware of was even possible yet, that we could have glass this flexible. So I'm very curious to see how that feels and how prone it is to breaking. If it's so thin it can bend like that, I'm worried that even a slight impact could shatter this very thin layer of glass.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But overall, I think if it had a bigger screen on the front, it'd be a big hit. It also kind of opens the question of what makes sense in a folding phone form factor, because we're basically taking a standard phone and just making it slightly more pocketable, which isn't necessarily what I would want out of a folding phone. I'd rather put an iPad mini in my pocket than make my iPhone half the size.
Yeah, exactly. I think the current phone sizes fit pretty well in the pockets, except for like the ultra big ones.
Right.
Yeah, so why not make something double the size of that, fold in half to the current phone size?
Right. Yeah, I think that's definitely the direction I would want to go for a folding phone. But maybe there's a niche for this. I think the biggest selling factor I've seen talking about this phone and the Razr phone that I've seen reviewers justify is like, you can hang up on someone by slamming your phone shut again. We haven't been able to do that in 15 years.
You can't overstate how satisfying that is.
Yeah. So, but I'm excited at the rate folding phones are evolving, and the fact that we're already to folding glass makes me really optimistic for the future of a foldable device from Apple in the next few years.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing Microsoft's one, whatever that's called as well.
Oh, yeah. Not quite foldable because it's two separate screens.
Yeah, but it's still like a flippy sort of design. Duo, is that it? Yeah, Duo.
I'm excited.
Which is kind of what we meant. It's like it folds down to like a regular phone size.
Yeah. I'm excited to see how their new take on a mobile OS works, because the demos they showed last year looked promising.
Yeah. Yeah, Microsoft's doing some good things.
Yeah. So, yeah. It was a busy week for tech, actually.
Yeah, it sure was. And it would have been even busier if not for coronavirus.
Man. Has that made it over to Australia? I assume you guys are pretty close to all of it, so...
I think there have been a few cases. I don't think it's spreading at all.
Right.
And we have like a island/detention center/hospital with a bunch of cases as well.
Okay.
Like it's where they're taking people as like a quarantine island.
Right. So there's been a handful of cases.
I think it's under control.
Well, but yeah. Scary stuff.
Yeah. Stock up on some canned beans or something in case society collapses.
Yeah.
And have a good week.
All right. Goodbye, everyone.